the importance of a diverse workforce talent with Ms. Priyanka Anand, VP and Head of HR, Ericsson. We have Dr. Naga Siddharth, CHRO, E6 Data. May I please request you both to join me on the dais?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for having us here. I think wonderful panel discussions till now. Very inspiring. Let's start this with the googly, right? I'll name a few brands and you guess what's common among all of them. Yeah. Boeing, Ford, Harley Davidson, John Deere, Amazon, Target, Walmart, McDonald's, Disney, Meta, right? What's common among all these companies is that they have been ramping down their DEI initiatives, right? And now let's look at Bharat. 0.4 million individuals positively impacted in the 1950s, and that's up to 41 million in 2024. I'm talking about affirmative action. 200 to 250 million since independence, so many lives have been directly impacted. I'm not talking about the indirect impact. 19,569 individual mother tongues, right? So while we look at DEI from different lenses, let us not forget our own lens, like Dr. Balasubramaniam was talking about, right? We have our own identity. We have been doing things. We have been making a positive difference. We are one of those countries where we have something called a maximum retail price, right? We go for vacation, and those of us who've gone to other countries know that a bottle of water can be suddenly 2 dirhams, can be 20 dirham, right? We do have Payment of Wages Act. We have Equal Remuneration Act. We have POSH. We have an act to prevent any kind of discrimination against those who are unfortunately infected with HIV. We've been doing a lot, right? We've also seen the effects of blindly giving opportunities versus creating opportunities to develop, right? In the journey towards inclusion. And finally, like Rory Sutherland says, he's one of my favorite people to listen to on YouTube. He says, nobody ever got fired for doing the obvious thing, right? It takes a lot of guts and risk taking to do something that's not obvious and being irrational to get things done, right? With that opening note, I warmly welcome you once again and invite you to share a few thoughts around some of the different kinds of stuff that you've been doing and your team has been doing, right? Your span of influence is global, specifically with Middle East, Oceania, Southeast Asia, and India, right? So eagerly looking to hear you. Over to you.
Thank you. So again, I can just briefly introduce myself and talk about the organization that I represent. So overall, more than 3 decades of experience of driving inclusion and being part of leading HR or practices, being coined across IT, telecom, consulting firms. That's a bit of me. My name is Priyanka Anand, and I work for Ericsson for this entire region, right? But as an organization, we have a huge amount of legacy to our credit. We've been in existence for more than 150 years. And again, not just in existence, we've been leading players in our industry, driving digital acceleration and connecting everything that's possible to get connected, and creating connected world has been our mantra, right? And the purpose that we really bring to the table is that how do we create digital inclusion across the 7 billion people that sit on this earth? By that same virtue, we are spread and have operations across 180 plus countries. And with 150 years of existence across 180 plus countries, with more than 100,000 employees working for us, we are purely inclusive in our approach because the industry that we belong to, which is telecom, is fundamentally disrupting itself every single day. Just think about your experience of telecom in the last 10 years. You would have experienced 2G, to 5G, all of that happened in a span of a decade. And today we can proudly say that 99% of our country has access to 5G, right? And Ericsson has partnered with service providers like Airtel, Reliance Jio, and Vodafone Idea to bring digital inclusivity to this country, right? And we deployed more than 480,000 base stations in less than 3 years. All this happened at an unprecedented speed with very clear commitment for digital inclusion at the country level by the government, right? And we have worked tirelessly with the operator or the service providers to make it happen. To us, digital inclusion becomes foundational to how the society will really progress beyond imagination. As an organization, we are led by our people to drive innovation that disrupts the technology that we create, right? So having an environment and an ecosystem when people feel empowered to not just try new technologies, but innovate, they're also getting a safe space to fail, to learn, to again ideate, innovate, and come out with successful outcomes, products and technologies that can be brought to the larger industry and society, like I said. And when I talk about us as an employer, we can pride ourselves of having had the fortune of employees having worked with us for multiple generations. Our employees don't talk about their tenure with Ericsson in number of years. They talk about their tenure in decades. So like I said, I've been here for more than 15 years of my 28 years of HR experience. So because we are so inclusive in terms of giving people opportunity for their potential, making sure that they're invested in to pivot into different career threads, and making sure that they're also invested in from a competence and upskilling perspective, it clearly creates an environment where they feel empowered, taken care of, and motivated and engaged to stay. So that's how we are driving our inclusive agenda.
Awesome. Round of applause. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I forgot to introduce myself. So when you did, I realized I didn't. So I'm Sidhu for short. I work in a wonderful company called E6 Data. We've been around for 4 years, not 180 years. 4 years. We are a deep tech company, and we work on a compute engine for data lakehouse on the cloud. Right, more of that offline. So coming back to this, you were talking about generations, right? There are very few other companies I've heard about. There are the Tatas, the Indian Railways, and so on, who really talk about the Louis Dreyfus, the Cargills of the world, the Bunges of the world, and so on. And something that actually wells up in oneself is this sentiment, right? If we look at typical Indian kind of inclusion efforts, if you look at Zoho, they've actually gone to villages, they've spoken to school kids, they train them up, get them to become software engineers, pay them a stipend. Right? There's a certain streak of kindness, right? If you talk about Infosys, TCS, Wipro, and so on, what they typically do is return to work, second career. Right, underprivileged, helping them scale up. So scaling up Ola Electric, for example, right, an all-woman workforce, very close to where I come from, right, Pharma's been doing it for a long time. If I were to write this into a mathematical equation and remove the common factor, there's this element of compassion that comes out, right? And compassion is probably what makes DEI go beyond frameworks and very cognitive, very cold, clinical stuff, right? Going beyond just tick in the box, right? Being very Bharatiya, right? Because that is probably the smell of the place of the conference and what the organizers are trying to do, kind of churning out that wisdom from what we are doing. Any thoughts around this? Creating a compassionate workplace while doing DEI?
Sidhu, that's a great question. And to me, I think there's multiple things that come to my mind the moment you talk about word compassion. First thing I would definitely say, an inclusive workplace is only going to be a reality when every single individual walking through the door or logging onto their computer can bring their full self to work, where they feel psychologically safe, where they're always encouraged to speak up, right? Speak their mind. They're always reassured that their point of view and inputs matter. And they can speak without any fear of consequences. When that happens, that's when we truly create an inclusive workplace. And to make that happen, it's everybody's job to be committed to it, and every single day. That's the only way we can create an inclusive workplace. Now, when we talk about compassion, right, I think what's very important is we've got to set the tone from the top. So as leaders, we just don't need to role model it, but also make sure that we are doing everything possible to make it connected to being inclusive as an organization, inclusive in terms of our culture, inclusive in not just making promises, but how our employees experience their association with the organization every single day, every single moment, right? When we talk to our leaders, we make sure that number one, we invest in their upskilling. So we've done a very scientific behavioral-based training called Upskilling for Inclusive Future. So we make sure that our leaders are both aware, but also trained on real-world case scenarios by use of technologies like AR with real simulations so that they're aware of what it takes to build an inclusive workplace. But they're also aware of what prohibits and what biases do come in place to make an inclusive workplace. That's how we create the right momentum at the top. Then we create a very clear commitment towards how our leaders need to act as real custodians of empathy, humanness, as well as making sure that the culture is rewarding, collaborative, and cooperative working. When all this happens, and they're always ready to listen in, they always understand that every individual can have a narrative or a story or a requirement which is not one size fit all. So how are we going to get ready to look at their unique needs and respond to them? When all this happens in a very compassionate manner, that's when you create an inclusive workplace. And that's exactly how we are training our leaders, coaching our leaders, developing our leaders, and we're investing heavily in every single leader becoming aware of the biases, but also transitioning from being pure play leaders to becoming coaches, becoming mentors, and creating an environment where they can have those dialogues in an open manner. So it really becomes a secret sauce to your question, Sidhu.
Lara kya mara? AI isn't going away from any of the panel discussions.
Agreed. The last set of panelists spoke about it extensively.
Right. So there are quite a few entrepreneurs who are creating tools, right? Recruitment tools, selection tools, who keep pinging, I'm sure you, right? And me. And last week, I had one such entrepreneur, very nice tool, great interface and so on. And then HR bad habits, so I started connecting with him and asked him what was he doing in life, right? So he's been, he's come from the hotel industry, great hospitality background. He's worked with doctors in some kind of mechanism. Then he's kind of built out a couple of companies, serial entrepreneur. And then I asked him, I was feeling a little mischievous. I said, hey, let's call him Mr. X, okay? So I said, hey, if I were to, let's say one of the large industry houses were to open, put in $1 billion and open a healthcare, a chain of hospitals probably, do you think you'd be a great fit there? He said, that'd be absolutely the right fit, right? I know hospitality, I've worked with doctors, I've been starting up and so on, I know how to get in funds, etc. I said, if I were to give your resume to your own tool, would it select you? He said, no. Right? So what we are facing is, of course, one is the gaming piece of AI, right? Everyone across the world seems to love to hate ATSs, right? They're saying nobody seems to be getting jobs, nobody is getting through ATSs, right? On the other hand, we are really looking at inclusion. So what we are looking for is looking for potential, right? The unseen potential, looking between the lines in the resumes, right? So any thoughts around this?
Wow, AI is one buzzword that you continue to hear in every single forum, every single conversation you have today. But the more I read about it, the more I learn about it from the experts, it's quite evident that it is not something we can keep on the side. It is going to define how the future will evolve. And the best way to define the future is to be part of creating the future that you want to see, right? So AI is going to be there in a big way, redefining how we do things today. And to me, the inclusion about AI starts from, again, from the first step that we need to take is making sure that people are not shying away from accepting what AI is, what it can do, but embrace it. The moment people start embracing the change, to me, it's really all about the mindset. If the mindset is about embracing the change, looking at what the potential of what AI can do, and that will only happen when we do everything possible to create opportunities for our employees to familiarize themselves with AI. That's when the fear psychosis go away and there's more acceptance and adoption of AI. So as an organization, we are doing everything possible to create AI playgrounds where people can play with it, understand, look at the potentials. We're rewarding successes with AI proof cases. So that's where it has to start as the tone from the top. How do we make sure that there is familiarization, adoption, learning opportunity, acceptance of AI? Yeah. Number two, what gets rewarded also gets accomplished, right? So how do we reward the behavior of people embracing AI? Integrating it into their day-to-day work and making sure that they're leveraging AI to their advantage. A lot of times people start to shy away from trying something new because they start to feel that it will take away its jobs, it will really be a disruptor. So the fear takes over the opportunity or the potential. Here what we are telling our people is, let's leverage AI to do parts of the job that can be done by a system or a tool or a technology so that it creates bandwidth for our employees to do what they can do the best. Their time is leveraged for where we see a value of human intervention. So targeted trainings, learning interventions, and rewarding people for leveraging AI and bringing it to their day-to-day work has really made the impact. And the third thing I would say is we've had it integrated with how we recruit. And what we're telling our line managers is don't get consumed by AI. Leverage AI, but always remember human intervention is always going to be a top up and will add value to what AI gives us. So be daring to challenge what AI gives you, but also leverage AI when you think it can take away a mind share of what should be the interview questions, what should be the assessment, what would be the simulation cases for this role. So create, in a way, artifacts, what you can do with AI, which takes away what you don't want to be spending time doing, so that you really spend time knowing the candidate and the individual, knowing the employees, and leveraging AI in ways to create their learning journeys where they can accelerate their growth both internally and externally, and grow with the organization. How do we performance manage them? How do we create curated learning pathways for them? All that can happen very easily with AI. And the last thing I would say, we are living in an era where we are pressed for efficiency, for productivity, for cost savings. If AI can bring all that to us and we leverage it, so we become the force of change versus becoming the recipient of an impact, it is really going to give us the power to drive the future with our own hands versus being a reactive recipient of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sidhu.
Probably one final question. We have around 6 minutes.
Okay.
I have one backup question.
I promise to be short.
I have a backup question also, just in case we are left with more time, but let's see. The right metrics get the right efforts happening on the ground. The wrong metrics can just take things on a different spin. Humans are irrational, right? There is this story of sometime in the UK, there were too many squirrels around, and hence people were incentivized on giving tails of squirrels and getting some amount of money, because the idea was, okay, they're going to eliminate squirrels and kind of give some. But then after some time, they found that the number of squirrels were actually increasing because people were breeding and encouraging a lot more squirrels to be around, because then they could get more number of tails, right? We have heard of some situations, I'm going to be the devil's advocate here, of AI, of DEI succumbing to tokenism, succumbing to stigmas, imposter syndromes, and so on. And hence, for our audience today, for them to take away something from here, I thought it might be absolutely valuable, especially given your rich experience of having implemented DEI across industry, countries, and so on. A couple of KRAs, KPIs, if you will, in terms of how do I make DEI practices come alive?
Tough question, but I think thankfully have been on this journey as an organization, so I think I can bring some of our experiences and share that with you so that you at least see how it's been for us. But I will by no means say that we've arrived. We're also on the journey to see how do we measure inclusion. But yes, years of experience of being proud of the culture that we have and nurturing it every single day in a very inclusive manner has been our focus, right? So one thing I'll start by saying that as an organization, we clearly believe what gets measured gets managed. So it's very important to have the right matrices defined at the top. And for us, inclusion gets measured by how engaged our employees are, how respected they feel in the environment, how is our sense of belonging of our employees, how are we looking at their stay intention, how are we looking at their retention. So many things together are put together to build our inclusion measurement indices, right? Or inclusion matrix. But the story only begins here, doesn't end here. So when we look at the matrices, we set targets, we of course look at how we're performing against them every single month, and we keep reporting them back. But more than just the matrices, we make sure that our leaders take ownership of creating that environment, and we give them feedback based on the scores that we receive on which areas are we doing well on and which areas need more investment and intervention. So to us, action planning, having a clear dialogue with those managers and encouraging managers to create a pathway of how they will drive inclusion in their respective teams is very important. Otherwise, it just comes, it just becomes a semantic that exists somewhere at the corner of the organization but doesn't become part of the mainstream. So when we look at the action plans, we look at the outcomes, we again measure the improvement that we are making. We also coach our leaders on how to become smarter and more inclusive at being inclusive leaders, right? So it's very important to have a coaching, mentoring of our leaders to put a much stronger traction on that journey. And the last thing I would say is, when we look at our scores and there are things that are derailing us to be at our wanted position, then we also take difficult decisions to either have a very strong conversation with the leaders that who need to change, or support the leaders by coaching them, mentoring them, or even putting them on a development plan to make the impact that we want. So at the end, our North Star is the inclusion objective that we have. Then everything else has to stack up for us to get to our wanted position.
I've been nudging you and trying to prod you and trying to get at least one or two, and to your credit, right? You've actually given us a lot more than we were probably expecting, right? You've been so generous to explain, the entire change management thing, getting DEI into the living force of the company, looking at getting things done versus tokenism and so on. Any one particular initiative close to your heart that really worked well? With that, we'll close.
One initiative. I would leave you with one message, which becomes an initiative, which is where we have a very clear dialogue with all our 100,000 people every time we connect to tell them inclusion is not going to be driven by a small team or an ERG on the side. Inclusion only happens when everyone makes sure that they are delivering and committing to the inclusion agenda every single day, every single moment. And the whole initiative is about making sure that when our employees look at their journey with Ericsson, they see how we as an organization are creating a win-win by mapping the moments that matter to our people, making it an equitable workplace, and making sure that our employees are both encouraged to bring their full self to work, but also rewarded for reaching their full potential.
Awesome. And I think on that very, very subtle but powerful note, it is DEI. Sometimes people leave the E out and say D and I. Kudos to you, if I may, for bringing in E. Right? Equity brings in a sense of justice, fairness, and makes the workplace truly compassionate. Thank you so much. Time's up.